Welcome, everybody. This is webinar 5 of 5. It's the end of the line. It's been a fun journey with you all. It's really put my nose in the literature to get some answers to some questions that I had been having that kind of rolling around in the back of my mind that I hadn't really learned the answers to. And I learned a whole lot more of them today, and it is actually having an emotional impact on me. And the emotional impact is I am less concerned about going out, catching COVID-19, and ending up in an ICU on a vent. And I will tell you why a little bit later. So with that being said, the topic is designing your future. What's coming next? I love what Arthur C. Clarke had to say about the future. The one thing about the future that we can be certain of is that it will be utterly fantastic. Which reminds me of the great Zig Ziglar and his story about the little boy that came home from school and told his father, "Dad, I flunked that arithmetic test." And the father said, "Son, that's negative. Be positive." He said, "Dad, I'm positive I flunked that arithmetic test." So there are positives and negatives about the future. Arthur C. Clarke is absolutely correct. There are probably going to be some marvelous things, wonders that we can barely comprehend if we can even comprehend it right now. And I'll share some of those. I aim to be mind expanding tonight. Here's a quick trip down memory lane. Webinar 1, we talked about how to boost your immunity. Webinar 2, we talked about how to get your head right. Webinar 3, we talked about how to take care of yourself biologically. And that was the Do It To Yourself Treatment of Depression seminar, but it also included the micronutrients that you need. Webinar 4, last time, we talked about how to save money on your health care. And webinar 5 is tonight, fifth and final, what's next? So as per custom, if you go to slideshare.net/LCadyMD, you'll be able to watch every slide that I'm going to show you tonight. And then also we'll be putting the recording of the Zoom webinar on our CWIYouTube.com channel. It should be up later tomorrow, probably. And then ultimately, there'll be a repository for all of these on my website, CadyWellness.com/hope. And it'll have the videos and the SlideShare. Okay, so I'm going to begin by predicting the future. And like my mentor of the mind, Dan Burrus, says, he never gets in trouble predicting the future because he only predicts what he knows are going to happen, but what he knows is going to happen. So here's what I predict. The COVID-19 pandemic will end. Herd immunity, vaccination, and creatively networked drugs will be used. Multiple waves of infections and shutdowns will occur until vaccine and herd immunity arrive. But I don't necessarily think that the future shutdowns are going to be nearly as severe as this first one. There will continue to be paroxysms in the healthcare. That means kind of like spasms. The present system will collapse. I'm going to give it to you straight. Technology will continue to disrupt. And we've talked about Burrus's 3 drivers before, and I'm going to reference them again later in the presentation. Increased processing power, increased storage, and increased bandwidth. And this will have major repercussions on people from all walks of life. Some people and companies will go bankrupt. Boomers will continue to age and get demented and other degenerative diseases based on lifestyle choices. We talked last week about how to avoid that happening. Depression will increase in the short term because of more stress. Chronic disease will continue in our society and the world until it becomes personally untenable to have to pay for the care, drug, surgeries that you yourself have caused. I know Canada has a marvelous social medicine program there where things are paid for. But there's a limit to how much taxes can be raised and how much medical care can be given free because you're in the program. Same here with Medicare in this country. The problem with medicine now is we have so much good science and so many diagnostic techniques and so many great drugs, many of which cost $2,000 to $5,000 per month, that it will bankrupt us if we don't do something. And one of the best things that we can do is what I talked about last week: put down the cancer sticks, start exercising, change your diet, lose some weight, get your blood sugar down, your blood pressure down, etc. I believe that Darwinian selection will occur, and I'll tell you why later. This isn't about eugenics or anything like that, but the sections of society that cannot get it together in terms of their health will have significant problems as the system fails. And I will show you more about that later. Technology will improve the capacity to deliver healthcare and mental health care. I mean, if you've got insurance, if you've got access, good for you. It's going to be great. If you don't, it's going to be frustrating. I'm reminded of two different videos that I've seen. One was an old Star Trek episode, the classic, Star Trek classic, called The Cloud Minders, where Kirk and Spock and the Enterprise went to this world where there were people that lived in the clouds, and then there were people that lived underneath the earth and worked the earth. And they were kind of the lowest caste, and the people that lived in the clouds were the high caste. And the problem is that there was no way for the people down in the bottom to work their way up. And another one was a Matt Damon movie that I was just thinking about. I want to say Elixir, Equilibrium, started with an E, where there was a exotic satellite circling the earth with artificial gravity, where all the beautiful people lived, and then there was crass poverty and deprivation down on the earth. And we're not there yet, but if things continue as they are, we'll get there. I think there may be some things that we can do along the way. In terms of technology, we can now do cognitive testing remotely. In fact, if any of you want to sample it, you can go to my CadyWellness.com website and just scroll down to the bottom of the page, and there is a do-it-yourself test that you can do. It takes 3 or 4 minutes. It's like a game to see how your brain is working. I don't get the data. Nobody will see your data, but you can compare yourself to norms and see what's going on. And this is one of the new techniques that we're using. And pharmacogenomic testing, which I have touched on previously, but won't dig into tonight. Future politics will have to become more inclusive and more democratic. The poisoned discourse will stop. Fact-checking will be universal. You can't fight the internet. And I've got the communication power of the internet there. You can't fight the internet. This morning, Twitter put some warnings about 2 tweets that Trump had posted and said, this isn't right, and here are the facts. The bots are here. There are now bots patrolling Facebook for music and making sure that no copyrighted material is being played. They're a little bit overzealous. It's a problem. But you can't fight the internet. It's going to democratize everything. Totalitarian regimes will not withstand it. And political lies will become impossible. Oh, and there's going to be a new baby boom. Stop and think about it. We'll come back to that. Let us begin with a definition of epidemic and pandemic. An epidemic is an outbreak of disease that spreads quickly. A pandemic is an epidemic that's all over the place, that has spread over a large area, a country, a continent, or the entire world. Well, COVID-19 is definitely a pandemic, no doubt about it. So here was one of our first major historically recorded pandemics. It was the Black Death, the bubonic plague. And here's an old sketch of it back in the day. Let me tell you about how it happened. It affected Europe and Asia in the mid-1300s. In the early 1340s, there was this great pestilence, which was reported in China, India, Persia, Syria, and Egypt. It appears to have originated in China. So this is early 1340s. In 1347, 12 so-called death ships arrived in Messina, Italy. And they were called death ships because the people that were on board, the poor sailors who were still alive, were terribly sick and had black boils covering their bodies, and they were many of them died. So it was called the death ship. In 5 years, it killed 20 million people in Europe, which was 1/3 of the continent's population. Now, just think about that when you start thinking we've got problems with COVID-19. COVID-19 is nothing compared to the Black Death. Now, were there some positives? Yes, there were positives. Almost all authorities agree that the Black Death hastened the breakdown of Europe's rigid class system. I mean, at that point, people were born in a high class, middle class, lower middle class, caste, and a lower caste, and you couldn't get out of it. It was where you were pigeonholed for life. But what happened is so many people died that the rich landowners now needed more peasants to go and do their harvesting and chores. And so the peasants, the previously vassals of noblemen, roamed the countryside demanding higher wages. And in fact, in a further breakdown of the caste system, nobility began to welcome marriages with merchants. And the reason is the merchants had money, the noblemen had titles, and between the two of them, it was a synergistic meetup. So some positive changes from the Black Death. I mean, I wouldn't have wished it on Europe so that they could work through their caste system, but it was still, there's still some good that came out of it, and there will be some good that comes out of COVID-19. The Black Death is, in fact, still around. Did you know that? Bubonic plague is still active in the world. The main infection burned out by the early 1350s, but then it appeared every generation for a few centuries. Modern health practice and sanitation mitigated it. Antibiotics are now available to treat it. We know it's Yersinia pestis, and we have a drug to kill it. The World Health Organization still says we've got 1,000 to 3,000 cases per year in the world. And CDC says we have 1 to 17 cases of plague per year in the US, usually in extremely poverty-stricken areas. The next big infectious disease conflagration was the so-called Spanish flu, which occurred in 1918 to 1919. I will call to your attention that I've got H1N1 highlighted. We'll come back to that. It was avian in origin. 1/3 of the world's population became infected. There was a 10% death rate with 670,000 people dead in the US. Now, today we're up to 100,000. I don't think the death count for COVID-19 is going to get that extreme. The Spanish flu killed 1 to 3% of the world's population, and the treatment, because we didn't have virologists back then or antivirals or drugs that might be helpful, we treated it with isolation, quarantine, good hygiene, use of disinfectants, and limitations of public gathering. So, speaking about those limitations, this is how LA coped. October 1, 1918, the first case of Spanish flu was reported. By October 11th, there were 680 cases, and the city closed down. 10 days from first case to 680 cases. The city fathers and the authorities said, hey, this is something we can't fight. We got to shut the city down. 10 days. That's a bit more brisk than what we've had from our government. There was a run on Listerine, peroxide, and other antiseptics, also mouthwashes. I don't know if there was a run on toilet paper, didn't see that. Public schools were all closed by mid-October. Parents were stuck at home with what was described as bored, antsy children. Churches were closed. Club and civic meetings were banned. And the term slacker came out in public at this time, and it was one who went out in public while ill and generally disregarded the prudent recommendations of city authorities. That was a slacker. And the regulations remained until January of 2019, which is quite a ways later. And then in February, the schools opened. So October 1918, all the way through 1918, into January 1919, and then opening the schools. So the CDC has on their website, you can see the web link up at top, this link for what a 1918 repeat would look like. Now, they put this up before COVID-19 happened because this is a 1918 repeat. They said if a severe pandemic such as occurred in 1918 happened today, it would still likely overwhelm healthcare infrastructure, both in the United States and across the world. Such an event would require significant increases in the manufacture, distribution, and supply of medications, products, and life-saving medical equipment, such as mechanical ventilators. It's true, and that's what's happened. Businesses and schools would struggle to function, and even basic services like trash pickup and waste removal could be impacted. That has all happened. This is like a replay of 1918, although I will suggest to you it is not nearly as deadly. Here's some more pandemics just to put everything in perspective. There was the H2N2 Asian flu in 1957. It had 3 different genes. It originated in animals too. Avian influenza A virus caused 116,000 deaths total in the U.S. 1968 pandemic was the H3N2 virus. It included 2 genes from an avian influenza A. That should be virus, not virus. 1 million deaths worldwide, 100,000 in the U.S. And this virus actually continues to circulate. So this is one of the things that you may get an immunization for as the genius minds look at the possibilities and the probabilities of various viruses emerging in the year to come. It's associated with severe illness in the elderly, and it continues what's called a regular antigenic drift. Antigenic drift means that over time, if you have the antigens on this virus stop being exactly the same, and it means it makes it more elusive for your body's immune system to fight it. So antigenic drift, and it continues. Then the H1N1 PDM09 virus, swine flu, occurred in 2009. Interestingly, remember H1N1? A third of people over 60 already had antibodies to it, likely from a previous exposure to another H1N1 vaccine. A vaccine was produced, but not until after the peak of the pandemic ended, and it continues to circulate as a seasonal flu virus. So it's not like it was here, now it's gone. It's not going to be like Ebola. Ebola was here, it killed a bunch of people. It was hopefully wiped out or brought down to a very small area. That one's not coming back unless there's some catastrophe. But these are going to be circulating. And COVID-19 is going to be circulating. So speaking of Ebola, it was discovered in 1976. It was a global epidemic. It affected people and non-human primates. 6 different strains, 4 caused disease. There have been intermittent outbreaks since then. It is an animal-borne virus, bats and non-human primates, and spread through contact with blood, body fluids, and tissues of animals. So as long as you're not dealing with those things, you're okay, but not not so with COVID-19, because with COVID-19, just virus particles that can be coughed, it can be in the environment, it can be on a surface where you pick it up and you wipe your eyes or your face, like I've been doing, and you can spread it that way. And then Ervebo was the vaccine that was FDA approved for immunization. So in terms of COVID-19 and how worried you should be about this virus, the question is, what are your betting odds? What are your Tropicana odds? And for my Canadian friends, Tropicana is our local casino, which I do not support. Do not support casinos. It's where poor people go to have their money taken from them. But anyway, we do have a casino, and there are betting odds. So what are your betting odds of dying of COVID-19, of getting infected and dying? And generally, we think it depends on age, obesity, and your pre-morbid lung function. So if you've got COPD, you're at higher risk. If you've smoked your lungs out with the cancer sticks, you're at higher risk. In comparison, so 1 to 10%, in comparison, the Black Plague had a 50 to 70% death rate, and Spanish flu had 10%. Now, what can we learn from the statistics that we've seen in Europe? Well, one of the things that we want to know is how many people out there actually have it and how many are dying from it. So this was in the New York Times, either today or a couple of days ago, and it talks about the missing deaths. So what they did, and you can look at the populations there: UK, Italy, Spain, Ecuador, France, Belgium, etc. And you can see the background death rates. And what they did, they took the background death rates for a year ago and compared them to now. And the only thing that's changed is COVID-19. So they figure if there's a death that has been reported, now you may not have your death reported to be due to COVID-19, but you will have your death reported. People keep those statistics. So if there's an uptick in deaths and there's no other explanation, they posit, well, it must be COVID-19. This must be taking people out. And so when we look at the current unadjusted stats with an inadequately determined denominator, stay with me, I'll explain it, and probably not the numerator, which I misspelled either, we see the U.S. has had arguably 99,804 deaths with 1,606,353 people infected or recovered, which produces a 6% case fatality rate. In other words, if you get COVID-19, your odds of dying are 6%, 6 out of 100. In Brazil, with Bolsonaro as their president, who says, oh, it's just like a cold, you shouldn't worry about it. So now their hospitals are getting overwhelmed like New York's were, and it's a bad deal down there. 11% case fatality rate. Those are grim numbers. But stay with me. When we look at a breakdown of global COVID-19 cases, we see 347,000 people have died. There are 2.6 million active cases. There are 2.3 recovered cases. So an active case means you've got it, but you're not recovered and you're definitely not dead. So that's an active case. You're in the hospital, you're getting treatment, you're on antibiotics, etc. So the total of active cases and recovered cases is 5,322,830. So when you put the deaths, I didn't use the death over 5 million. I used the deaths over 2.6 million and 2.3 to get the accurate percentage. So that is 7%. So this doesn't seem all that much better. 5%, 11%, 7%. It's still rather up there. Which group is the most deadly for COVID-19? This was looking at Italy. So 42.71% of the deaths that occurred from COVID were in the 80 to 89 year range. About 36% were in the 70 to 79% range, 8.5 were in the 60 to 69% range, and 2.6 was in the 50 to 59% range. So this is Italy. It's not going to be exactly the same here in the US, but the interesting thing is it does show an age response curve. The higher your age, the more your risk. So just because, I'm going to back up, just because this says 7% and these say 6 and 11%, that, ladies and gentlemen, is all comers. It does not necessarily refer to a 45 or 50-year-old in great health with optimal hormones, who's exercising, who's not smoking, who's in great shape. Their odds are not going to be this high, but there's even something else, which I'll get to in a minute. Let's talk about the SARS-CoV-2 structure. That's the technical name of COVID-19, and the peculiar biology of the infection with it. First of all, there's a high risk of interhuman transmission. One of the difficulties is it's got a long incubation time, and it has an early and sustained viral load. So you can be walking around infecting people with it and not even know you've got it. Less so Ebola. If you get Ebola virus and you're infected, you're going to start bleeding out of all of your orifices. That's pretty unmistakable. But with COVID-19, it's very subtle. So you get these existence of asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic carriers. The most notorious in history, of course, was Typhoid Mary, who carried typhoid around with her and continued to infect people. After you start to feel better, after your symptoms go away, you're still shedding virus for days. And then there's an unfavorable progression toward respiratory distress and death in up to 5 to 10% of patients, thus causing dramatic healthcare challenges. Now, this is published in Annals of Translational Medicine 2020 last month, April. 5 to 10% risk of death, they say. This morning, I checked into Yahoo Finance. This was a graphic as of yesterday, 5/26. I have the tri-state of Illinois, Indiana, and Kentucky highlighted, as well as our friends from Ohio. You can see the confirmed cases here, the deaths and the recovered. So I did my calculations. I looked at the deaths compared to the confirmed cases and recovered, and it was a 4.8% case fatality rate. You say, well, you're still not making me feel better. The least you've gone is 4.8%. Is it really that bad? Now we get into the interesting things. So there was a prime minister of Great Britain named Benjamin Disraeli. He presided over the peak of the British Empire. He was prime minister twice. Disraeli said there are 3 types of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. What about those statistics that we're seeing? Can we really believe those numbers? Let's take a look at that. So this was the Stanford and the Santa Clara County study. They found that 2.8% of the residents of Santa Clara County were infected, but didn't even know it. And compared to the number of cases that they thought that they had infected, that implies that there were 48 to 81,000 people infected in Santa Clara County, which was a 50 to 85-fold increase over the number of confirmed cases in the county. Now, so that means they thought that the number of confirmed cases were a lot less. But in point of fact, if you do the statistics and extrapolate it, it was 50 to 85 fold more people. So let's just take 50x. We'll go down to the bottom. The study said this suggests that the large majority of the population does not have antibodies and may be susceptible to the virus. That's true. It also establishes that there are a much larger number of people who have had clinically silent infections, and these people are not getting counted, neither in the original study in Santa Clara or the more recent studies. Here was an examination. This is kind of looking in the natural state. Pregnant ladies, 211 asymptomatic pregnant women. That means there was no clue that they had no clue that they had COVID-19, nor did anybody else. And they delivered at New York Presbyterian Allen Hospital. 13.7% of them were seropositive for COVID-19. Then there was another study in Iceland. Generally, it was 13.3% of all men, women, and children of those recruited for testing tested positive for COVID-19. 6.7% for children under the age of 10, 13.7% for the age group greater than 10. So 14% of the population having clinically silent COVID-19. So let's take a look at this. So if you look at the fatality percentage, it's actually the number dead divided by the number infected. That's it. It's a cold-blooded calculation. The University of Miami Miller School of Medicine in Miami-Dade County did a second round of community testing. They found they did 1,800 people who completed blood tests for antibodies, and they shared their health information. 6% actually tested positive to SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19, which was 165,000 people. Now, check this out. Previously reported testing site data there said that there were about 10,000 cases. Well, there were 165,000 cases. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look down to the black box at the bottom with a red type, because I wanted it to stick out, that is a 10.65 fold adjustment for the number infected. What do you think it would do to jack the number of infected up and see what that does to the fatality rate? We'll do it. This is more about the Miami-Dade County study. We are 95% certain that the true amount of infection lies between 4.4 and 7.9% of the population, are between 123 and 221,000 residents. These results are similar but not identical to other recent non-randomized testing programs that have been conducted throughout the United States. African Americans and Caribbean communities may be twice as likely to be infected with COVID-19 than other racial groups. And I've got all the hyperlinks down here, and you're welcome to check it out. So Financial Times, in a piece, April 16th, said that there was probably underreporting of deaths of COVID-19, which makes sense. So I'm going to show you two things: underreporting of deaths and underreporting of number of cases. So underreporting of deaths, let's stop and think about this for a second. Somebody dies. They haven't been diagnosed with COVID-19. They haven't been in the hospital. They haven't had a test. They just die. So that death is not reported. On the other hand, that's the underreporting. The underreport, okay, let's back up. So you also have people that have COVID that die, that they didn't have their antibodies checked. They actually had it, they died from it, but nobody knows. It was diagnosed as pneumonia, pulmonary, I don't know, pneumonia, cardiopulmonary problems, etc., but they die. And it is estimated that of those people that die, some of them are dying with COVID-19 and they're not getting tagged for that. So underreporting of deaths 318,000 instead of 201,000. So it's 1.58 fold more deaths than reported. And New York City, in balance, said that there were, excuse me, I take that back. New York City also said there were 24,800 estimated excess deaths versus 20,720. So it was a 17% undercount. The statistics said there were 20,720 people that died of COVID-19 in New York City. These people are saying, no, that was an undercount, 17% undercount. The actual death rate was probably 24,800 or 1.2 times more death than reporting. So I want to look right here. We've got 1.58 and 1.2, and we divide that by 2, and we get a 1.35 fold adjustment factor or fudge factor for the deaths. So if you really want to get accurate, you would probably take the number of deaths reported and multiply it by 1.35. So that would make the case fatality ratio worse. By the way, here's some great things. I'll come back to my theme in a moment. COVID-19 excess deaths tracker. It's updated regularly. Here's Austria all the way down to the United States. So you can go there and check it out yourself. So what is the real death rate? So here's the actual real death rate. So if you take 98,223 deaths, and you multiply that with the fudge factor of 1.35 because you think the deaths are getting undercounted, and you divide by 2,041,925, and you multiply that by 30.3 because of the vast undercounting of cases, you end up with 132,601 actual deaths divided by an honest to goodness number of 62 million people infected. And when you do that, you get a 0.2% actual case fatality rate. That's probably close to the correct answer. We're not going to know it for some time. We may never know the exact number because of the sloppiness that some of the statistics have been gathered with. But it's 0.2%, I think you would agree, is a lot less than 5%, 6%, 11%. So the reason for the dramatic overcount is not because people are trying to pull the wool over the American people's or the Canadian people's eyes, but because they're scientists. And scientists deal in what they think are facts. And if they've got statistics that show this much of the population is infected, that's what they're going to use. But they're not looking at all of it. There's a vastly increased amount of people that are infected that don't know about it. So in terms of looking at this, I went back to something I learned from my father, the 10 Commandments of mathematics, and commandment number 4 is one of my favorites. Thou must use thy common sense, else thou wilt have flagpoles 9,000 feet in height, yea, even fathers younger than sons. What is this talking about? It's like you have to figure out if something is reasonable, if it feels right, if it's approximately correct. And if you think about 5 to 7 to 11% of people dying with COVID-19, we've had a lot of infection cases. I don't think our death rate has actually been that high. So, and then the seat of the pants test. Consider the cruise ship. It is the perfect microbiological petri dish of humanity. And wouldn't it be interesting to figure out how many people were infected and how many people died on cruise ships? So I went to everybody's favorite reference, Wikipedia, and there are other citations off of this. But the Diamond Princess cruise ship was one of the most interesting. It was quarantined at Yokohama for 1 month. 14 people died of 700 people known to be infected. Known to be infected. Not that were infected. They were known to be infected. And this yielded a case fatality rate of 2%. And then there was Ovation of the Seas, and there was 1 dead out of 79 infected, and that's a case fatality rate of 1.3%. And then there was another cruise ship, the Celebrity Apex, 224 persons tested positive out of 1,444, which was a 15% prevalence in the population. That's a little bit higher than we see societally, and the reason is that by and large, it's an older group of people that are on cruise ships in their golden years, retirement, doing what they've always wanted to do, and it's a higher risk group. So two of these that show a CFR of 1.3 or 2%, and then another interesting true prevalence of 15% on another cruise ship. So now here's the actual case fatality rate. It's 0.2%. When you get all of the data together and massage it, 0.2% probably. That concludes the first part of this. Now I'm going to boldly go where no shrink has gone before. We'll talk about doctors of the future and what's coming. So what I have seen is that my colleagues are getting burned out, depressed, and many of them are killing themselves. My friend Pamela Weibel, who's a family medicine doctor that is famous for her work with suicided doctors and who published the book Physician Suicide Letters, says 400 doctors kill themselves every year, and it's probably 800. And the reason for the undercount is doctors are smart people, and they know how to commit suicide in a way that their family can collect on their life insurance, and that people won't condemn them for it. Other physicians do it very dramatically, jumping off of buildings, and killing themselves with guns and so forth. But doctors are sick of their profession. They have unhappy patients, and this is Sandeep Johar, who wrote this book, Doctor, The Disillusionment of an American Physician. If you're not aware of this theme in society, you should be. As far back as April 2010, in this survey by Merritt Hawkins, which was done in 2009, 60% of physicians would not recommend medicine to their children as a career. This is from Mayo Clinic Proceedings, December 2015. Burnout and satisfaction with work-life balance among U.S. physicians are getting worse. American medicine appears to be at a tipping point, with more than half of U.S. physicians experiencing professional burnout. And this is before COVID-19. Doctors are also getting laid off by hospitals because the elective surgeries are going down. And in terms of drugs that are out, I think hydroxychloroquine, that's over and done with. I don't care if Trump is taking it. It's a dumb idea. There's no published data for it. There's no reason to take it. Remdesivir has been studied. It looks like it's a little bit better than nothing, but it's not a miracle drug. One of the things that's being used in medicine is convalescent plasma therapy, where a patient gets infected, they fight off the virus, they've got circulating antibodies that is harvested through a plasma donation, and then the plasma is infused into an infected patient. And it really seems to be quite helpful. So my view of the future is that the system is going to run out of money for healthcare. It was already teetering. COVID-19 is going to push things farther along. Patients will run out of money for healthcare because drugs are going to get to be more expensive. Deductibles are going up. Premiums are going up. Insurance plans are constantly changing. And so that's going to be a problem. Ultimately, both medicine and mental health care will end up as a split model in terms of medical practice. And I think this is from now on. Some of it will be face-to-face in person. Some of it will be remote like this. I will tell you, as a practicing physician, I have really enjoyed the remote work, Skype, FaceTime. I'm not using Zoom yet with patients, but I probably will. Even the lowly telephone is very useful to stay in touch with people. And the other thing I'll tell you is I've noticed that my ADHD patients show up on time for their appointments when it is virtual, as opposed to getting hung up in traffic. So kind of cool. But there's going to be a split model. Now, in terms of the economy, there's good news and bad news. One of my friends, a guy named John Jenkins, I asked to help me when I gave a presentation on ADHD to the community. And this is what he said about the previous treatment of ADHD. Well, in my day, we just call them slow and send them to work on the farm. That's a direct quote. I wrote it down. I asked for his permission to use it. He said, sure. We call them slow and send them to work on the farm. Unfortunately, those jobs are gone. Anything that you can do with pure manual labor is going to get taken over by a machine. Even things that require some mental computation are going to get taken over by a machine. This is me in Schnucks Pharmacy here locally, right after they got their first check it out yourself machines, and that replaced scores of checkers. This is what my way home looks like when I come back to the Evansville Regional Airport. You'll see over on the left cash or credit, but on the right it says credit card only, and there is the little booth right there with the yellow box around it. And I don't have to stop and see a real life human person. I just stick in my credit card and it's done. That's one job that's been eliminated. This is a brick path laying machine where you no longer need a bunch of people out sweating under the sun. You just toss all the bricks into this thing and it knits them together and lays it down and puts in the filling. This is a new way to lay asphalt. Instead of the huge road crew, you get this mammoth machine, and and this was laying rubberized asphalt on I-17 in Phoenix. There are a couple of themes that are going to happen. I've got them grouped as the two Dans. Dan Sullivan, mentor of mine, founder of the Strategic Coach, published a book in 1997 called The Great Crossover. He said there have been 4 great crossovers in the entire history of civilization. The first is we learned how to talk. So we weren't just a bunch of cavemen people saying, we actually, the tiger is coming, or that might be food, or we should go inside and take shelter, language. Second, we learned how to write it down. Third, we really learned how to distribute it with a printing press, because before that, the monks were copying the illuminated manuscripts and so forth. The 4th great crossover is the microchip. And it is transforming, decimating, manipulating multiple societal issues right now. Dan Burrus talks about the 3 drivers of change, one of which has to do with the microchip, and that is processing power. Many of you have heard of Moore's law, that every 18 months, the speed of computing doubles and the price drops in half. And it's still on track at this point. Now we're looking at quantum computers in the future, or DNA computers. But Burrus says processing power, yes, increased storage and increased bandwidth. So for those of you on the webinar tonight, great. This is a pretty good bandwidth exercise. 5 years ago, wouldn't have had the bandwidth. 5 years ago, you wouldn't have been able to binge watch through Netflix and Amazon Prime Video because the bandwidth wasn't there. And nor would the programs have been stored to begin with because it would have taken so much storage. Now we've got cheap storage and much more is being put up in the cloud. As a result, let me go back one. As a result of the microchip and the fourth great crossover, there are going to be changes in society. So this is a robot butler that will, this is the bellhop robot at a Silicon Valley hotel. This is welcome to your new anesthesiologist on the team. This is a box, a computer where anesthesia is being administered by this box. Now, there's probably this guy over here is watching it, but it makes it much easier to run multiple operative positions. So, anesthesiology. Found this one today. This was published back in 2018. Artificial intelligence rivals radiologists in screening x-rays for certain disease. In a matter of seconds, the new algorithm reads chest x-rays for 14 pathologies. I like the first sentence. A new artificial intelligence algorithm can reliably screen chest x-rays for more than a dozen types of disease, and it does so in less time than it takes to read this sentence. So that's coming. What about lawyers? I won't make any lawyer jokes. I have many friends who are lawyers. I enjoy working with lawyers for forensic stuff, but there's kind of a knock against them. And what about the law? Well, the bots are coming for the lawyers too. It won't totally put them out. I don't think computers are going to be arguing in court anytime soon. But in terms of some of the drudgery and the background work, it's going to be sorted through that way. Now let's talk about your investments. So the stock market is now actually run by computers, algorithms, and passive managers. There is now something called a robo-advisor. FinTech is financial technology, FinTech, how FinTech is disrupting retirement. So people can now put their savings in for basically an artificial intelligence to invest their money and rebalance their portfolios and keep them out of trouble. It's not going to do as well as Warren Buffett used to be doing, but it does reasonably well. And so that's coming for your broker. How about your teachers? Well, yes, AI can make teachers better by providing greater insight into what students need. This says at the bottom, the AI-powered systems will teach children and will continue learning with time. The behavior will change with more changes and the systems will operate accordingly. And in the second paragraph right here, automation will put the jobs of different teachers at risk. If you're a brilliant teacher, I think you've got employment security for quite a while. But if you're just a teacher that says, okay, class, we're going to pull out our worksheets and do them today, that can be done by a machine. Unemployment, underemployment are contemporary problems and will likely worsen. I love this cartoon. And I show this to you next to this book, Average is Over by Tyler Cowen, Powering America Beyond the Age of the Great Stagnation. And Tyler Cowen, who is considered a leading, a thought leader in economics, says the middle class is being inexorably eroded. STEM careers or management having to do with STEM, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics, or managing one of those are the only safe careers. If your job can be done by a machine or a replacement or outsourced to a cheaper labor market, you are dead. Medical care rationing. He said medical care rationing was coming. It's here. There's medical care rationing. When I write medications for some of my patients, they can't get it. Their insurance says, oh, it's not covered by the insurance plan. Government can't possibly keep its promises. I don't care how good your government is, with all of the promises that's made about, yes, you can have free care for life and it doesn't matter what you do, and we'll surgerize you, we'll rotor out your coronary arteries, whatever it takes. That rationing is here. So many of you may remember Andrew Yang, one of the Democratic presidential contenders here in the U.S. For this latest round. Biden is now the presumptive nominee. But Andrew Yang is an interesting guy. He's an Asian, very bright, founded a company called having to do for, Venture for America was the company. And his book, The War on Normal People. Sorry, didn't have a chance to proofread this adequately, obviously. The War on Normal People. And when you look at that, the second chapter, it shows the gap between productivity and hourly compensation has been increasing since 1973. So this is how our workers and our economy have gotten more productive, and this is how the compensation has gone up. But that's not the worst of it. Here are the jobs added to the U.S. economy from 76 to 2015. It's going down, 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 down. From 2006 to 2015, just 4% of the jobs were added to the U.S. economy. And this will really make your blood boil. If you look at where normal folk and rich folk were between 78 and 80, they were all clustered together. When you get out to about 1982, it begins to diverge. Now the lowest quintile is down here, and this is the second quintile, and this is the highest. This is the 81st to 99th quintile right here, and this is the top 1%ers right here. So what's happened to the top 1%ers? Their cumulative growth and average after-tax income has gone up 278%. And the average man or woman that's gone up, you throw all those together and crunch the numbers, that's about 40%. That's pretty sad. Jeff Bezos, by the way, has, I think his net worth has gone up 14% this year because Amazon is doing so well, selling so much supplies to people shut up at home with COVID-19. And there's going to be loss of jobs for anything that can be done by a machine. This includes grocery store checkers, anesthesiologists, family medicine docs who can be replaced by a computer, and nurse practitioners and PAs, lawyers, paralegals, ditch diggers, asphalt layers, garbage men, teachers, hotel maids. If it can be done by a machine, it's going to be done. I did some catching up over the Memorial Day weekend. I called a credit card company to cancel a card and to get one sent to me. And I will tell you, the computerized interaction, the voicemail and the prompts and the natural speaking and the speech synthesis, those are a bunch of jobs that have gotten pulled out of the economy because now there's a machine that can do it. And machines do not require health insurance. They don't file unemployment claims. They don't slip and fall and cause you to have problems there. They don't strike for higher wages. They don't demonstrate. They don't have Facebook posts that condemn your company. So there's a lot to be said about the machines. And I think entrepreneurs will use as many of them as they can. This was from Callum McClellan from IoT for All. There's the web link. He says a 2-year study from McKinsey suggested by 2030, intelligent agents and robots could replace as much as 30% of the world's human labor. We need to prepare for a future in which job loss reaches 99%. Which brings me to this cartoon. I used to love Sylvester. Hope I haven't brought you to the point that I'm about to exceed the limits of your medication. So let's look at some positive things. So here's TSA, total traveler throughput, 5-day average log scale. It went down late April, early May. It's beginning to come back up. If you follow the airline stocks after Warren Buffett sold out of all of them, somewhat rashly, I think, as travel has begun to pick up, those stocks are increasing in value again. There will be a new post-pandemic, and these are some things in education. So let me deconstruct this. There's going to be a big class of 24. That's like high school, college. What do you think these people have been doing when they've been locked up at home with their spouse because they can't go anywhere? You think maybe there are going to be some more babies that have been conceived? So there's going to be another baby boom. There's going to be more remote work. We've shown that if we can do it, I would never have been seeing patient after patient after patient by phone or video conference if I hadn't been made to because of COVID-19. But now I am. So there's going to be more remote work, more personalized competency-based learning, community connect, the end of 30-year standards-based reform. We're going to leave that behind. More home-based hybrid learning leading to fewer expensive schools and colleges. There are going to be a bunch that will go out of business. There's going to be a continuity of learning with a blended curriculum, better safety nets, and this concept of mutuality, new mutuality. We're all in this together. What's going to happen to retail, healthcare, and education when we go back, when society begins to open, as it is right now? And what about public gatherings? Well, there'll be some commonalities. Number one, people will expect the locations to be clean. There will be social isolation still until the pandemic is over. People will be wearing masks. There'll be extra cleaning. There'll probably be cleaning certifications. There'll be people standing like my staff with an infrared thermometer checker to zap your forehead with a red dot to make sure you're not febrile. But there's also going to be increased clarity about the true risk of COVID-19. There'll be more smartphone use to pay for things because it's touchless. You don't have to reach into your wallet, pull out your cash, or get your credit card and hand it to somebody, or swipe it and stick it back in. All you do is hold your phone next to the zapper thing and hit the button, and you've paid for it. Improved testing is likely in the near future, both more painless and more accurate. In China, there are now immune badges on smartphones. If you have the antibodies to COVID-19 and you're considered immune, you can have a badge which you can show people their positives and negatives about that. There's going to be a hybrid system of education and work. Some education and work will be done at the office or school. Some will be done at home. Some will be done mobile. Tim Ferriss, he of the 4-Hour Work Week, wrote that book decade and a half ago about how he traveled the world and ran his company remotely with 4 hours a week from different exotic locations. And he's a great storyteller, so I won't presume to tell you the story, but it's well worth reading. And at that time, there were very few things that you could do mobile like that. I couldn't do psychotherapy with patients over Zoom or Skype or FaceTime. And it's not that all I do is psychotherapy. I do medication management, hormone management. And when I'm seeing patients, I would never have dreamed of being able to do that at any place other than my office. And now we can. If you think about your job, your career, if you're employed, just ask yourself, what are the things that you might be able to do remotely? So in the past, I've talked about your health and your resilience. I ran across this recently. It was the Blue Cross Blue Shield Health Index by age, and it was published in 2017. And you will see, ladies and gentlemen, that after 27, it's all downhill. So the question is, what are you going to do to, if you recall our discussion, rectangularize the survival curve? What can you do to rectangularize the survival curve? Well, this is one of my heroes. His name is Jeff Life. He's been described as the most famous shirtless grandfather in America. He has a book, The Life Plan. He was my personal physician at Synergenics for a period of a year or so. And he's a really incredible guy. And that was less than a decade ago, 2011. Here he is. I've been asked if Jeff Life is a real guy. Yes, he is. Here, I put this picture in just to show it. So let's take a look at that and review everything and put it in context. Webinar, we talked about boosting your immune system. So if you don't want to die of COVID-19, get your immune system under control. Webinar 2, we talked about how to get rational. Webinar 3, we talked about don't be depressed, get your micronutrients right. Webinar 4, and this is where it gets into what your life is going to be like moving forward. Webinar 4, we talked about stop sabotaging yourself with bad habits and bad activities. And tonight, I'm saying change is coming, and now is the time to deal with it. My advice to my Jewish friends, this is a picture of the Holy of Holies of the temple in Jerusalem. Back in the day, like pre-1993, pre-WYSIWYG internet, if you wanted medical advice, you went to your doctor, the high priest, typically priest, of medicine. Now we've got high priestesses, but back then it was the high priest of medicine, typically. And you consulted him for advice. Now people go and ask Dr. Google. So here are 3 of my favorite websites. This is no longer the Holy of Holies. Now, anybody can get here. It's democratized. So google.com, everybody knows that one. Scholar.google.com is a great website. It was brought to my attention by the noted autistic speaker, lecturer, writer, Temple Grandin. And then my favorite for scientific things, PubMed.gov. If you want if you truly want to know about case fatality rate, what the true incidence is, if you want to look at what's been reported on cruise ships, go to some of these places and check it out for yourself, and then make your own conclusions. Now, by the way, in terms of the calculations that I've done so far for you tonight, I think I came out with a 0.2% rate. The exact number isn't important. I don't care if it's 0.2, 0.25, 0.275, 0.15, 0.3, 0.4, but I do care if it's a lot less than the 5 to 7 to 11% case fatality rate that people have been talking about. Here's some more upsides. Dan Burrus says the pandemic is an accelerator to innovation. Welcome to innovation. This is the first time I have ever presented webinars like this from this office here in Newburgh, Indiana, to the internet at large and all my Canadian buddies up in the not-so-frozen north. It's been an incredible adventure to begin mastering this technology. And so the pandemic is pressing us to up our game. And he says in every single industry, it wasn't perfect in the first place. It certainly hasn't been perfect in medicine. maybe this will catalyze some change. So for me, I've found video conferencing and telemedicine to be a total revelation. And then we are going to have some hard conversations about medicine, who is going to pay for it and how you qualify for it. Speaking of which, the baby boom from 2020 to 2040 couldn't come at a better time, because people are now wringing their hands over there won't be enough people to support the Medicare population. And lo and behold, it looks like we've got a new generation that's just about to pop. Commerce or self-sufficiency will be required. So in the future, we're going to have to do something to make money, to engage in commerce, not to just sit around and take a welfare check. That was one of the things that I did not like about Andrew Yang, even though he was brilliant, even though the statistics were great, even though he made a great point. His solution was send everybody a $1,200 check every month. And this country was not founded on sending everybody a check. I love this cartoon. Grandma survived the Great Depression because her supply chain was local and she knew how to do stuff. So if you're losing your job or have lost your job and you've got food insecurity, you could do a lot worse than to go out, dig in your backyard and stick in a garden. I've got patients that have gardens and they feed themselves for a year with what comes out of their garden. And then for a really optimistic view, I like Adrian Berry's book, The Next 500 Years. Now, by the way, this one is a modest one. He also has a book called The Next 10,000 Years, but that's much more speculative. This one is more grounded in science. So according to Adrian Berry, there's going to be climate change. He's concerned about the ice age. I think we've got climate change with global warming right now. We're going to have to mitigate it. He talks about the rise of intelligent robots. We're going to farm minerals and chemicals from the sea. We'll have moon bases on the moon from caves. Mars will be terraformed. You can see the, or terraformed, I guess, terraformed. You can see the schedule right there. We will need to avoid asteroids because there's a lot of them floating around. They're huge meteor craters on the planet right now. It's thought that a meteor wiped out the dinosaurs with one cataclysmic event. We'll have to avoid that. But not only will we need to avoid the asteroids, but we can mine them for precious metals. And then, believe it or not, interstellar travel using antimatter drives. And I'm not talking science fiction. He talks about the fact that you can generate antimatter if you have a low, basically a vacuum environment. And he talks about putting colliders in airless vacuums on worlds, asteroids perhaps, and creating the antimatter and then using it for drives. It's pretty interesting. He doesn't talk about warp, though. I'm going to close with this picture of Mesa Arch and the reflection of Freeman Dyson. He said, mind has waited for 3 billion years on this planet before composing its first string quartet. It may have to wait another 3 billion years before it spreads all over the galaxy. I do not expect that it will have to wait so long, but if necessary, it will wait. The universe is like a fertile soil spread out all around us, ready for the seeds of mind to sprout and grow. So I hope as we wrap up this 5-webinar series that I have disseminated some seeds into your minds to sprout and grow. The future could be stupendous. We just have a few things that we need to get worked out before we get there. So with that, thank you for attending. I will stop my screen share and I'll be happy to take questions. Thank you again. And I am here and I see my ladies up there, and there's a chat, and here we go. So now I know what Corinne was doing while I was presenting. She said, I did the test on Dr. Cady's site. It was good and fun.
I think she was doing that before.
You think so?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm sure she did. Your presentation is so riveting. There's no way that somebody would be going off. And she doesn't have ADHD either. So
that's right. I did it last, just after last webinar.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah, it was great.
All right. Any other questions? I'm looking at my chat box here. I have a thank you from a lady that I know well. I appreciate that. And I see the participants here, attendees 18. Oh, I see one of my doctor buddies here. Another friend, nurse practitioner, Mensa guy, RN, a drug rep. This is cool. Any questions at all? And if not, I think we should close it down. And then Elizabeth, we were talking about perhaps getting back together for a massive Q&A session and kind of a community meeting. So stay tuned for that. I will put things about this on our Facebook page, and also my constant contact letter, which comes out most recently has been about once a week, but not usually that frequently, a couple times a month. So if there's nothing else, I think we should call it a wrap. Wait. So I have an answer to Elizabeth. How can we get previous webinars as well as this one? Great job. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. The webinars, 4 of the 5 are right now live on CWIYouTube.com. Don't go to YouTube. Type in CWI YouTube. It takes you directly to our channel, and they're up in the top left corner. And it's 4 of them. And by tomorrow, there'll be 5. And then the slides are all on slideshare.net/LCadyMD. And before I leave tonight, just like I did last week, I will put the slides for this presentation out there. Let's see if there's anything else. Going once. Going twice. All right. Thanks, everybody. It was a pleasure to get these together and to do the preparation. And I'm honored with your attendance, and I hope that they were meaningful to you. So thank you very much, and good night.